week we are going to be talking about informational text structures, and we're going to go more into that later this week, and we're going to dive a lot deeper into order and sequence, compare and contrast, cause and effect, and problem and solution. And we're not going to go that much into detail with description, because I know you guys know how to describe anything that, like if I asked you to describe yourself, you would definitely be able to give me some adjectives based on yourself. So with the informational text structures, these are structures that are used for nonfiction texts. And you may be asking, hey, why are these so important? Well, it's going to be important for you to be able to distinguish between these 5 things, so that you are able to do that on iLearn if we have that at the end of the year. Definitely these text structures come up throughout your years of school, so we're going to talk about them today, and we're going to go through the overview of all of them, and we will then also go over an example of sequencing today, and then we will get into it. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is a description, and each one of these pages has a example, a definition, and some signal words. So these would be great things if you want to pause the video and write down a few notes about them. I think that would be great to have in your notes, so you're able to go back to it if it comes up on a performance task or a cold read in the future. So the first one is description. So this is to tell about something. So the example they gave you was the starfish has 5 legs and lives in the ocean. And for this description, it's describing the starfish, how many legs it has, and where does it live. And some of the signal words, so these signal words are really important, because if you see any of these words in a nonfiction text, you'll be able to say, hey, that structure, and the signal words tell me what structure that is. So a couple of them, if there's characteristics, so we were describing how many legs the starfish had, and then where the starfish lives. Then there's a couple of verbs, like are, is, like. There could be an example, the word also, another, maybe to illustrate, to begin with, on top of, or in addition. So all of these signal words describe the structure of description. So going on to the next one. Next one is order and sequence. So this is to show events or procedures in time order. Another way to describe this would be using a timeline. So in a timeline, you have a start and then you have a finish. So that definitely helps kind of sequence out what's happening in the nonfiction text. So last week when we were talking about the frog's life, that was an example of, with that text feature, with, I think it was a diagram, where it had the timeline of the frog's life. That would be, and it also an example of order and sequence. So the example is a starfish starts as an egg and then becomes a larva. So that sentence tells us where the starfish starts and where it goes after what the next step is. So a couple signal words that order and sequence use is first, second, third, next, later, then, before, followed by, and finally. So those are some words that if you see those, you know it's order and sequence. Next word is compare and contrast. And compare and contrast, a great example would be using a Venn diagram. And I know you guys all have seen that. So a Venn diagram, remember, is the two circles. So if you have one here and here, on both sides, there's going to be two differences of two things. And then in the middle is the similarities between those two things. So a definition for compare and contrast is to show how two or more things are alike and different. And in this example, still with the starfish, that we are comparing and contrasting starfish to sand dollars. So the example is both starfish and sand dollars have tube feet to move them along. So in this case, they're comparing how they're both, or they're contrasting, sorry, not comparing. They're contrasting their tube feet. Yes, they may look different, but they both are able to move along with their tube feet. If we were comparing them, we may say, hey, a starfish has 5 legs, or I don't think they're tentacles. I think I would consider them legs. And then a sand dollar doesn't really have legs. It's more like a circle. So just either one, but compare and contrast again is to show two or more different things that are alike and different. So some signal words that you could find is like, unlike, also, similar, different, to, as well, as, however, although, and then same as. So the last, we got 2 more. So cause and effect. When I think of cause and effect, I think of, there's some of my favorite books, and I wish I had them there at school, but they are the verses books. So there's a bunch. The one that's coming to mind is the killer whale versus the great white shark, like who would win. And so they go through the book that talks about the two animals, and when they do something, they explain like why something happened and what happened to cause something they did. And those books, I think, are a great example of a nonfiction text. And there's multiple different text structures in that book, but the cause and effect is the example that comes to mind. So the definition is to show why something happened and what happened. And the example they have with the starfish is that if a starfish loses its leg, it can grow a new one. And this is something that I actually didn't realize. I thought that if they lost a leg, that it was gone. But I guess with a starfish, they're able to, if they lose it, it just grow a new one. It's kind of like an octopus. They do the same thing. And then a signal word here. So we have so that, due to, this led to, as a result, since, so, for this reason, and in order to. And it's kind of, all those words have to do with, if something happens, you're able to explain why that happened and what was caused by that. So those are kind of, they can be kind of tricky, but we'll talk about them later this week. And then the last one is problem and solution. And with problem and solution, you're able to tell about a problem and then show the solution. So if you think about like maybe an issue that you have, like if you're trying to figure out what you wanted to be for Halloween last weekend, that's a problem. So a solution could be maybe Googling ideas online, and then you figure out what you want to be for Halloween. If you're thinking about what you want for breakfast, maybe that's a problem, and then your solution is trying to find something in your pantry. So another example with the starfish is A population explosion of starfish is damaging the Great Barrier Reef, but scientists are finding ways to solve this issue. So the problem in this case is there's a lot of starfish, so they are just like booming right now. There's so many of them, and because there's so many of them, they are ruining the Great Barrier Reef, which is this huge ecosystem for a bunch of animals and creatures of all kinds. But scientists are doing some research and stuff, and they're trying to figure out ways to solve the growing population of starfish. So some signal words that you could use to find if your text is a problem and solution structure include concern, solve, challenge, help, prevent, so that, the answer, one reason is. So those are all of the informational texts that we're going to talk about this week. And today we're going to talk more about order and sequence. And another way to describe this, you may see the word chronological, and that is to put something in a specific order. And they kind of go hand in hand, and sometimes some may see that they are kind of mixed, and that is okay. So let me get the that we have, and we're going to do this first one, and it's called Building a Campfire. And I'm going to read this to you, and we're going to do we're going to do some of the questions together. So let me pull this up. Sorry, I can't see it very well, so I'm going to pull this up so I can see it. All right. So the passage is called Building a Campfire. So sitting around a campfire is a classic summer camping tradition. Before you can tell scary stories, though, you all need to build your fire. Begin by gathering firewood from around your camp. In addition to wood, you will need some tinder, like pine needles, bark, or dead plants to help ignite the fire. Then, dig a small pit for your fire and build a ring of stone around it for maximum safety. Place your wood and tinder into the pit and start the fire using an ignition source such as a match. Once ignited, slightly blow on your flame to build heat. When you have a flame, use large pieces of firewood to build a teepee. Now sit back and relax in front of your roaring campfire. So, the first, I kind of already told you what what structure this is. So the structure this is order and sequence. And the reason why it's order and sequence is because there's a bunch of keywords that are listing out the steps of building a campfire. So I'm going to underline a few that I found important. So the word begin. If you see the word begin in any of your nonfiction texts, that is the beginning of a step or a list of steps. So definitely keep that in mind with order and sequence. If you see the word then, and I think they had in addition to, those words are just continuing with the list, and they're putting it in order of what should happen. And then let's see. So they have once. That's a good one. And then now. That's a good one. So that kind of gets to the last step, and that's when you in this article it's saying now you get to sit back and relax. Another example of order and sequence is completing or looking at a recipe. So if you've ever helped whoever is cooking your family, I know this may surprise you, but Mrs. Palmer is not great at cooking. So Mr. Palmer does all of the cooking in our house, and he is not the biggest fan of recipes. but he does follow a few. So he has to look at some of the recipes and follow steps and put ingredients in specific ways, like what the recipe says. So those are some examples. So we did number 2. So it said circle 3 words that give you a clue about the type of text feature or text structure used. We're going to do number 3 because I think it's important to understand how to use context clues. So there is a few words and there are some text features that are in the text that we talked about last week, and this is a italicized word here. And this word Tinder, it's not the app that we know now, but Tinder is another word that can help build your fire. So the sentence is, in addition to wood, you will need other tinder, like pine needles, bark, or dead plants to help ignite the fire. So from the sentence, if I didn't know what tinder was, or if I just had one idea of what it is, I would go back to that sentence and I would read it again. And when I was reading it, it made me realize that tinder is other materials to help a fire. So my sentence here, I could say the word tinder means other, let's do this, other materials to help build a fire. So this tells me, when I was reading it, even though if I didn't understand what tinder was, I was able to go back into the article to use my context clues and prior knowledge of maybe what pine needles are and bark and dead plants, and maybe what the word ignite means. So that is my example about order and sequence. And we're going to do the rest of these throughout the week so you guys can see some examples more in depth of informational text structures. So after this video, you are going to have a discussion